Oakwood is the largest amusement park in Wales by far, and unfortunately, it will remain closed for the 2025 season, and it likely will never reopen. I only visited this park once, and I had a nice visit. But there were some signs this park could be in trouble. In this video, I will discuss the reasons this park could be closing, and review the park as a whole. Oakwood opened back in 1987. Due to milk quotas, a farming family decided to open a leisure park. They started off small, but after they added the Snake River Falls water slides in 1994, they saw a large attendance increase. So they decided to transform themselves into a full-fledged theme park. This led to a decade of bold investment. This included 2 major roller coasters and some large non-coasters. This started with Megafobia in 1996. This immediately became the best coaster in all of Wales, and it has served as the park's signature attraction ever since. Then in 2006, the park added Speed No Limits, a steel coaster that became the tallest and fastest coaster in all of Wales. In late 2007, the original owners sold the park to Aspro Parks, a Spanish company, and they have owned the park ever since. Under their watch, Oakwood did not add any new thrill rides. They only got modest investments. This mostly entailed some lightly themed areas, some kids' rides, and refurbs to existing attractions. Flash forward to 2025. Oakwood just announced they would not open for the 2025 season. That wording does leave open the possibility the park could return in the future, but I am not optimistic. Aspro cited declining attendance numbers and rising operating costs. They specifically mentioned the rising prices for ride parts, fuel, food, insurance, and the national minimum wage, all as issues that made Oakwood unsustainable. So what happens next? It is unlikely that Aspro will ever reopen Oakwood. In the same press release, they note that they will use the park's assets to improve their other properties. Aspro owns a mix of aquariums, water parks, and a few theme parks, most notably the 2 Walligator parks in France. I suspect we'll see some rides moved there. This winter, Oakwood dismantled both the Bounce Drop Tower and the drenched Shoot the Chutes ride. These were 2 problematic attractions, but they were taken down carefully, so they are relocation candidates. I also think some of the park's other flat rides could be moved. Now what about their 5 coasters? 2 of them have been relocated once before, and it could easily happen again. Creepy Crawler started off at M&D Scotland before coming to Oakwood, and Crocodile Coaster originally ran at Camelot Theme Park. Speed is another strong relocation candidate. It is a modern and appealing coaster built on a relatively flat plot of land. Treetops could go either way. On one hand, we have seen several Zier Tivoli coasters be relocated. On the other hand, we have seen several from the 1980s either close or get retract. If this is moved, I think it only has a few years left, so it may not make financial sense. Last but not least is Megaphobia, and I hate to say it, but I think this coaster is doomed. It is much, much rarer to relocate a wood coaster. It is especially rare to relocate a wood coaster this size. Add in the fact this is a terrain coaster, and I don't think there's a chance this is moved. I suspect the only way this reopens is if Oakwood reopens, and it doesn't seem like Aspro will be the ones to do this, especially if they plan to gut the park. I also doubt another operator will buy them given their recent attendance figures. Many Oakwood trip reports in recent years have cited low crowds, and that was my experience in 2024 on a summer Friday. Everything was pretty much a walk-on. Meanwhile, the other UK theme parks I visited in my travels were much busier. A major issue for Oakwood is its location. It is quite remote. It is located in southwest Wales, far from any major city. This poses 2 problems for visitors. 1. Cell service is atrocious. I struggle to even load Google Maps to leave the park at the end of the day. There is some Wi-Fi in the park, but it barely works. 2. It is a long drive from where most people live. It is a 2-hour drive from the capital of Wales in Cardiff. Then it is too far for most people to make a day trip there from England, as it's roughly a 4 to 4.5 hour drive from London. Likewise, it was a pretty big detour if added onto a theme park trip, because there's not much else in that corner of the country. I was stunned to even find out you could actually get to this park via public transit. It wasn't easy, and it would take longer than driving, but you could do it. There are buses in the nearby town of Narberth that go to the Bluestone Resort, which is located directly behind Oakwood. It looks to be a mile walk from there to the main entrance though. Then you can get to Narberth via train from the larger cities in Wales like Swansea, Newport, or Cardiff. Then those cities specifically have trains linking them to London. If you arrive by car like most people, there was a large free parking lot. This was quite a ways from the park itself. Not many rides were visible from there except Drenched, because the latter was located adjacent to the main entrance. As a result, there actually was a train that brought you from the parking lot to the main entrance, and I'm not talking about a parking tram, I'm talking about a narrow gauge railroad. You alternatively could walk if you wanted to. As of 2024, day tickets started off at £36, but they could cost nearly £50 if purchased the day of in the summer. And I think these prices were another detriment for visitors. The UK's largest theme parks such as Thorpe Park, Alton Towers, and Blackpool Pleasure Beach often cost less per day to visit, and those parks have deeper ride lineups, making them more attractive. Another problem for Oakwood has been ride availability. They would often have multiple major rides closed for years at a time. To their defense, they would update the website at least so you'd know going in. Spooky 3D was the park's lone dark ride. It closed after the 2022 season. It was supposed to be rethemed and rebranded, but that never happened. Drenched was an intimate shoot-the-chutes. When it was available, it would only operate in the summer months on reduced hours. But it too closed after the 2022 season, before ultimately being removed. Bounce was a Huss drop tower. This ride was SB&O from 2016 to 2022, then it suffered an incident in 2024 that caused it to close once again. This has been another issue for Oakwood: accidents. This has harmed the park's reputation in the public eye, contributing to a downturn in attendance. In 2024, Bounce was e-stopped after a violent bounce. No major injuries, but the incident was caught on camera and went viral. In 2022, a passenger fell out of the Treetops roller coaster. No fault was found with the ride, but it still did not look good. And then in 2004, a girl was tragically ejected from Hydro, which later would be renamed as Drenched. The park was found to be at fault and sued, which is a contributing factor why the original owners had to sell the property to Aspro. While the diminished crowds did make the midways feel a bit dead, it did give the park a very relaxed feel, especially when combined with all that greenery. There were a lot of shade and trees. There's a reason this park was called Oakwood. This park also had some hills, including a large one in the center and a large pond towards the back. I particularly liked how Megaphobia's drop is set against the latter. It was very picturesque. This was a park that smartly relied most on its natural beauty. There were a few smaller themed areas, most notably Neverland and Spooky Street. These looked okay. There were some structures and signs, but the designers clearly did not have the same budget as the UK's larger theme parks. Still, I did appreciate the effort because the areas do at least have a cohesive feel. The park as a whole was relatively easy to navigate. However, there were a few annoying dead ends, most notably the pathway leading to Speed. You walk down the length of the coaster, and there is nothing else over there. No other rides, shops, or eateries, just Speed. I also thought the staff here was great. They were friendly, and they were also as efficient as you could reasonably expect given the circumstances, especially because most rides had just one operator. This included all the park's roller coasters, so the crew members would have to check the safety gates and restraints on both sides of the train before they could send it. The only real operational delays for me were not even necessarily the park's fault. My visit coincided with the country being hit with the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto. There were 20 to 30 mile per hour sustained winds all day long, and 40 to 45 mile per hour gusts. Whereas the major coasters at several other UK parks were closed, Oakwood had all their coasters operational. They did have minimum rider requirements in place, but that was completely understandable given the circumstances. Later in the day, the high winds caused a brief power outage. The park very easily could have closed given the low attendance figures, but the maintenance workers busted their tails to reopen everything for the last 2 hours of the day. I really appreciated that, and it showed the park cared about their customers. Now let's run through the attraction lineup. While there were not a large quantity of attractions, particularly for adults, I did think the offerings were balanced, assuming everything was operational. The park had 5 different roller coasters. As noted at the start, the star was easily Megafobia. This was a CCI wood coaster, and it was running great. The park worked with the Gravity Group in 2023, investing over £1 million to retrack and reprofile the coaster. The start had some excellent flagector airtime, particularly the first drop in the back row. The airtime did decrease in strength as the coaster progressed, but the minimally banked turns produced solid and sustained laterals. The ride did feel sluggish towards the end, but that could have been a byproduct of those harsh winds. Speed No Limits was the best steel coaster here. This was a Gerstlauer Eurofighter. There was some great ejector airtime at the start between the Beyond Vertical drop and Camelback. The vertical loop had good positive Gs, and the barrel roll had fantastic hang time. And despite the over-the-shoulder restraints, this coaster was reasonably smooth, outside some vibrations. There was a steep drop-off in coaster quality after that though. Creepy Crawler was a compact Pinfari. It was slow and felt like it would valley at every turn, but the pullouts were super tight and offered some positive Gs. I really lucked out with my height though. If I were any taller, I would have bashed my knees into the seat backs due to the cramped trains. If I were any smaller, I would have hit my head into the over-the-shoulder restraints on the transitions. Treetops is a Zier large Tivoli coaster interestingly placed among the trees. Due to the super long 20-car train, you got some shockingly nice whip and laterals on the first 2 drops in the back. It was otherwise a mellow but scenic experience. Crocodile Coaster was the final coaster, if you even count it as one. This was a teeny tiny powered coaster with barely any elevation change. It was meant for kids, but adults could ride it, and the cars comically could rock side to side if you shifted your weight. I don't really think that was supposed to happen, but it did. This was part of the Neverland area, which was the park's premier kids area. This landed a few different play areas and rides themed to Peter Pan and Company. It was a nice mix of mechanical and active attractions. There were 2 rides in this area I want to call attention to. One was Sights of London. This looked like your standard kids' car ride at first, but this one was dressed up a bit as you passed some themed buildings. 2 was Skull Rock. This was the park's log flume. It was relatively small, but there was a dark ride section. The scenes were static, and admittedly they looked cheap, but they did add to the experience. Then the final plunge had a pinch of zip to it, and the final splash could get you quite wet, especially with a heavier boat. This was one of a few different water rides Oakwood offered. This was one of their strongest areas. Drenched was probably their most iconic water ride. This was a 120-foot or 37-meter tall shoot-the-chutes ride from Intamin. It featured a nearly vertical plunge and a drenching splash, hence the name. I was really bummed it was closed for my visit because I heard it offered some intense ejector airtime. My favorite available water ride was Waterfall. This was a rare Bailey Aqua Scoot. You sit on a sled and travel down a sizable and steep drop. It offered a pinch of airtime over the top and some serious speed. Then you shot across the water. If you kept your weight forwards, you would elegantly skim across it. Fail to do so, and you would comically wipe out, getting absolutely soaked. This ride always had spectators around it, because it was an absolute riot scene if people would make it across unscathed. Another notable water ride was Snake River Falls. This was a Whitewater West dinghy water slide. There were 2 open ones with a quad down. No airtime, but solid speed. The enclosed ones were slower, but they had a more complex layout and some turns with decent sway. The final water ride of note was Boating Lake, which were paddle boats that could be taken on the water over by Megafobia. These offered some sweet views of the coaster. As for flat rides, Oakwood did not have many, especially for a park that had this much land. There was a large sky coaster in Vertigo. These rides are always a rush, but they are very pricey upcharges, and this one was no different. Bounce was a rare Huss drop tower, but it barely operated over the past decade. It didn't look to drop fast enough to offer the usual freefall sensation, but the sharp rebound effect at the bottom looked like it could induce some nice positive Gs. Then, they had 4 to 5 spinning and/or pendulum rides to round out their offerings. As for dark rides, there were not any available for my visit since Spooky 3D was closed for the renovation that never happened, and their Haunt and Witch Hunt only operated seasonally. The final ride of note was Bobsleigh. This was a sled traveling down a hill in the center of the park. With a clear path and minimal use of the brakes, you could travel pretty fast, but a lot of people did not want to push it too hard because you could actually wipe out in this one and get very hurt if you were not careful. What else did this park have? Coaster and theme park enthusiasts could find a special gift shop over by Megaphobia's exit. There, you could purchase used ride parts from the park's attractions, and they were much cheaper than the other parks I've seen do this. As for food, I chose to eat after my visit. I did not see too many eateries inside the park, and what they had seemed a bit pricey. Lastly, this park offered an event in the summer called After Dark. On these days, the park stayed open until 10 p.m. This was a rare opportunity to get night rides on Megaphobia. Then the park also had a party-like atmosphere with all the live music, and then they'd finish with a fireworks show. By all accounts, these were the park's busiest days, and it's a shame they could not sustain these crowds daily. All in all, I enjoyed my afternoon at Oakwood. It was a pleasant experience between the diverse ride lineup and the atmosphere, especially because I could lap everything to my heart's content. I was able to sit on Megaphobia and keep on lapping it. The minimal crowds ultimately were a major component of the park's downfall though, so in the long run, that probably wasn't a good thing that everything was a walk-on. I definitely had wanted to come back to experience Megaphobia in more optimal conditions and try the major rides that were closed for my visit, but that probably will never happen. And that's a shame, because it was easily the best amusement park in Wales and in the middle tier of UK theme parks overall. I hope someone saves Megaphobia and this park as a whole, but I really think that's doubtful given this park's location and financial struggles. Again, I hope I'm wrong. Those are my thoughts on Oakwood, both as a park and in regards to its closure. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this news update and review, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you consider subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.